Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm here to answer my monthly Author's Answer question. The Author's Answer series was started by J.D. Archer and his writing group, where they pose a bunch of reading and writing questions directed toward writers. And I've been doing one of them per month. I'll link to JD's playlist and my own down below. So question number 30 is fan fiction legitimate literature? Which, whoa, talk about stepping into a quagmire. I have friends who swear by fan fiction, who write it and enjoy it, and I have a personal history of writing fan fiction, particularly for the 90s kids show Space Cases. But I also respect a lot of the arguments against it, so... I mean, in terms of defining literature as something of artistic merit, it does seem like technically fan fiction would always fall a little bit short because it isn't completely your own art. Although that's a little loaded as well because we take inspiration as writers from all sorts of things. And another pet peeve of mine is people who swear by, everything that they write only coming from their own imagination. I mean, that's just not possible. And if it is what you're doing, then it's probably not that deep. But of course, there's a difference between being inspired by something and writing within someone else's universe. And there's a difference, say, between fairy tale retellings, I'm reading a bunch of those right now, and telling something in a universe that is definitively written by one or several people, whereas fairy tales have been shaped and reshaped by several authors throughout history, it seems. Also, there is technically something known as the public domain. If we go into the legality of this question about who can make money off of fan fiction, it would of course be if a work is in the public domain or if you have the consent of the creator. And that only seems fair because, having those legal protections is one of the only ways that most artists have by way of showing respect to what it takes to create that work. Saying that no one can steal your property is basically an ethical tenet that most of us abide by. Perhaps we just don't think of it much, especially because the most popular fan fiction is derived from the most popular stories. So it's not like these authors are hard up for money. This really is more just on the ethical level of what's fair given the work that people put into things. And I get that fan fiction writers can put a lot of work into writing fan fiction. I don't think that it's a complete waste of time in terms of a writing exercise, because you often have to think up a new plot, or if you're doing some sort of alternative universe, you do have to perhaps experiment with characterization and setting and that sort of thing. But it certainly never will be as deep as it would be if you had to think all of it up on your own characters, your own plots, your own settings, whole cloth. But I also have to respect that that's not the only reason why people write fan fiction. It's not only a stepping stone toward writing. A lot of times it's about the community that crops up around fandoms. That's why fan fiction has been popular online on sites such as Tumblr and LiveJournal back in the day, and certainly through zines and everything from before the internet. And also fan fiction has come under greater scrutiny in today's day and age because it's so much more ubiquitous with the internet. It's much more easy to gain a larger following than it would have been with, a paper publication that's just distributed among a few people. As a writer myself, well, I am in the process of preparing for a fantasy project. And of course I'm in early stages, so I don't have anything concrete to talk about in terms of this, but I do know that fantasy is a fertile playground for fan fiction out there. And I think what might jar me the most, hypothetically speaking, is if fan fiction takes on a life of its own and suddenly people prefer the fan fiction to what I write, which seems patently unfair. I mean, I'm thinking also in terms of, where this has really happened, like if people prefer fan fiction retellings to Harry Potter or A Song of Ice and Fire or et cetera, et cetera. And it does seem patently unfair to say, how dare the author not go in this direction, because without the author you wouldn't have these characters in this world. So fan fiction brings out these interesting lines or blurred lines between creators and readers about who owns what, because, it's also a popular idiom to say that once the story is out in the world, it's for the reader and not for the writers anymore. Like, I can't force you to feel a certain way about what I write. You feel it on your own. But does that mean that your feelings and beliefs and visions about my story should be more legitimate than my own? I don't think that's fair. Maybe you should be judging my own story based on my own story and not based on the fan fiction of others about it. So yeah, that's where I think I struggle the most with the idea of fan fiction. Admittedly, I haven't really written much of it myself for several years, although I do count myself as being inspired by stories, some of them like fairy tales and all others like A Song of Ice and Fire, although I'm not writing straight up fan fiction. But I do respect the idea that, these things are supposed to be inspiring. But meanwhile, fan fiction-based fiction does seem to be gaining some traction. Book Riot just published a list of fan fiction-based fiction, mostly based off of Twilight. And to be fair, I think that's more of an inspired by thing than a straight up in universe thing, for the most part. So really, perhaps it would be more fair to call that being inspired by fiction rather than writing fan fiction about it. I don't know, I guess the lines are going to stay blurred here, but I am pretty optimistic that ultimately original stories and the writers who write them still have a strong readership. So that's all I got for you now. I'm getting this video out a little later than I hoped to. It's been kind of a slow month for me on the YouTubes because I've been spending a lot of the month doing a BookTube scavenger hunt. I just posted a book haul video about that I'll link down below, but now that's all over and I have just a couple more weeks in September to squeeze in some more videos, and I'm hoping to end with another AuthorTube video, my big piece de resistance of the quarter, my quarterly writing wrap-up. So before I get to that, I might want to get to a little more writing. And I'll also be back tomorrow to have my Friday Reads video out, and I'm hoping to do a couple more things for the Sci-Fi September motif. Fun times ahead. So thanks so much for watching, everyone. Keep writing, and I'll see you next time.